It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine. Okay, I'll stop singing now. Sorry. Here we are. But once again, as in a bit like 2016 with the US election when we all woke up to that news, or for those who followed it through the night, I think that REM song kind of feels like a fitting sort of note after last night's election results. So this is just going to be a quick video, me doing a little bit of reflection, a bit of soul searching if you will, but I'll try and keep it quite light-hearted. But especially looking to the future and who should be the next Labour leader, because clearly Corbyn has already said he will not stand at the next election. I guess it's just a case of when he will step down. So he's kind of half committed to stepping down. Although, 5 years is a long time, assuming that's when we'll get the next election. So he's not giving away much detail, to be fair, on that one. But yeah, it's obviously not the time for massive reaction, but certainly a lot in the Labour Party and people elsewhere doing a lot of reflection and debate. And ultimately, I've just been listening to some discussion on the radio about it, and I mean, one Northern Labour voter said, he's very disappointed and worried about the future and stuff, but it's not really a surprise. It's been obvious for a very long time that Jeremy Corbyn, for whatever reason, just wasn't electable as Prime Minister. People just don't trust him enough. And obviously, in the end, this did become the election of Brexit. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it should have been. I think the other issues should have been certainly as much considered, if not more, and that I think those things should have been enough for us, let's say a certain majority to see through some of the fluff that Boris has been putting out there. But in any case, it did turn out to be the Brexit election, in my opinion. I think there were other factors. I think anti-Semitic issues in the Labour Party didn't help. And I think that is something Corbyn has to face up to. He has been weak on those issues. And I mean, I've just, as I said, just been listening to 5 Live and some of the discussion, and they had the Guardian journalist, Polly Turnby, and she, as always, was very candid. She was very thoughtful, but really strong as well, really stinging attacks on Labour and Corbyn and their whole approach. But she made some really good points that a lot of people hadn't, and she said basically the layout of the manifesto was a big problem, because although it was seen as generally a positive manifesto and a progressive one and one which could make a difference, and a lot of people, I think working class people particularly, would be in favour of that manifesto, or at least some of it. But she just said it was the layout and the presentation, it was just too rushed, there wasn't enough finer details. And I think she has a good point, because obviously there's been a lot of question over the finances. Do they actually add up, the sums? That has been questioned by experts, and I think if there's one lesson we should maybe learn from governments and their mistakes, is that they should maybe listen more to experts. And let's be fair, I mean, the experts have also said that the Tories, their sums don't add up, so it works both ways. So I don't think it's some bias against Labour. But yeah, I mean, it has been said, I think I read a bit in the paper, someone suggesting that maybe they went a bit too radical, they went a bit too much with all the different, policies, and, really going for it with the taxing and all the money. And I think they did fall into the trap of making like the NHS, for example, about money a bit too much rather than highlighting certain areas where you can actually improve and look at constructive methods. Obviously, it does need funding. It needs more funding desperately. No one's going to deny that, really. But yeah, I think at certain times they went about it the wrong way, and there were certainly questions on if their sums added up. I mean, another thing mentioned in the paper was, and they just the broadband thing. It sort of came out of nowhere. There was no real hint of that before, and then suddenly they hit us with it. And yeah, it didn't really give a lot of detail. So I think Polly Turnby, very good insight on the radio actually about what went wrong. I think she makes a good point about the manifesto not being presented in the best sort of light, even though it sort of largely is seen as like a progressive manifesto. The other issue she highlighted, which was again interesting, was the fact that Corbyn was too sort of tribal in a way. You know, he sort of insisted on being surrounded by Corbynistas, you know, people very much in his own mould, and that really backfired when it came to campaigning, because you know a lot of the people who are in the party but have slightly different, you know, political beliefs than Corbyn. Emily Formby, for example, Yvette Cooper, very experienced again. They were sort of shut away and not really given a platform to really promote Labour and to promote, you know, change and stuff. You know, so yeah, Polly made the point then it was the usual faces that just weren't connecting with the public, and that someone a bit different might have had a fresh approach and could have got the Labour name out there, the Labour brand out there a bit more. So she was very critical on the radio earlier. I think she made a lot of great points, made a lot of sense. You know, I mean, obviously the media is a massive issue in this country, the written press particularly, and I mean, that's why it's no coincidence then a lot of the elected prime ministers have been favourites of the Sun newspaper and the tabloid press, largely, and you see the really melodramatic headlines and the scrutiny of Corbyn. So, I mean, there's definitely some sympathy there, but again, going back to what Polly was saying, I'm quoting her a lot, but I thought she spoke really well. You know, really, Labour politicians have had to deal with that, you know, for many, many decades now, and so it's not really a new thing. So it's fair to say Corbyn suffered from that, but maybe others have suffered as well. So it's not necessarily an excuse. I still think, although that was damaging, I think you just have to fight for it and do your best. And I think there are areas where Corbyn really let himself down and perhaps didn't put his ego a bit before the party and, more important, the country. I think those are fair criticisms, although I do think at times he's been handed a harsh card because of, you know, the bias of the press and media and various things. But I do think he's done a lot of damage himself as well to his chances and to the Labour Party's chances. As you know, has been said, I think you need to look at who's electable really and new ways forward, because this experiment, although it's had supporters, it just hasn't worked out ultimately. So that brings me on to the new Labour, who of course, Corbyn hasn't stepped down yet, but he will at some point. It's just a case of when. And they need to go in a new direction. As I was saying, a fresher MP. At the moment, Keir Starmer is the favourite. I mean, not a terrible shout. I don't know yet how he would fare, you know, with scrutiny, and he doesn't yet strike me as the sort of character, you know, who would be really that outgoing and, you know, quite bubbly, but you know, I think he's quite sound politically. He's a little different from Corbyn, although he has been quite a central figure in Corbyn's campaign. So I don't know if if he might suffer because of that. Rebecca Long Bailey's on the list. I think she was second favourite. She's a bit more of a Corbynista. And Jess Phillips, the third favourite at the moment. You've got Emily Thornby a bit further back. She's always quite a popular kind of fringe candidate, if you like. I think Lisa Nandy, someone like that, should be considered. Maybe it's a little too early for her. She's still quite young for a politician, for potentially. But, I think that's what we need. We need young, vibrant, forward-thinking women. As I was saying last night, I think Labour needs to break the mould of the traditional, kind of middle-class white man, quite set in his ways a bit, there is a history of that and a sort of an association which Labour has to try and break. They have to go for something different and a different approach, freshen things up, because potentially over time, I think at the moment there's a lot of support for Boris, particularly with Brexit voters, but over time I think that will evaporate and I think he will be more and more exposed. So it is very much a Trump 2016 situation where I think it was more Corbyn being seen as a weak candidate than Boris being seen as being that strong, even though obviously his Brexit message had cut through. But I think it was more the lesser. I mean, for me, clearly the lesser of two evils was Corbyn, but, a lot of people didn't see it that way, so that's the way it went. So it does remind me quite a lot of the 2016 US election. And another bad night for the left. Very troubling, the fact that Boris and the Tories now have a majority, and to potentially have that sort of dangerous figure leading the country for the next 5 years it's very troubling. So the next move by Labour is crucial. But yeah, if I'm going to stick a flag in the race, I'm going to go for Jess Phillips as the leader, the person I think should be the next Labour leader. She's a feminist, she's very direct, very tough talking, very down to earth, very grounded. I think she can connect with younger voters. I think she's got a good sense of humour, doesn't take herself too seriously. And that's something I would label at Corbyn, where I think he was a bit too stiff at times. He took himself, although he had a sense of humour, I think sometimes when he was criticised or where maybe he was the figure of fun, I think, he took himself a bit too seriously at times. And Jess Phillips isn't like that. I think she is more bubbly. I think she is more lively. I think she has a sense of humour that could connect to younger people and to people in general, to voters. I think she's very sensible the way she talks about politics and is very, very, a working class MP connected to her constituency. I think I remember the sort of day after the European elections where obviously it had been a bad night for Labour, and she came out very strongly, very critically of the party's strategy over Brexit, saying they weren't direct enough, they didn't have a clear enough message, and that's why they'd suffered. She was very honest and very direct, whereas Diane Abbott, who was in the studio, was really fumbling on that, really making sort of quite weak excuses. So she really impressed me that day, Jess Phillips. I think she's very direct, very powerful, very well-spoken, sensible politician. As I said, a forward-thinking politician, connects to the working class. And I think she's very brave as well. I think she does put herself out there, which people like to see. And you know, she has stood up to a lot of the just nastiness and abuse she has gotten on social media from basically idiots, and that's a sad thing which a lot of female MPs now face, and is very scary the way things are going in this country. But there you have it, my reasonings and my belief, and I believe Jess Phillips should be the next leader of the Labour Party. So I'm going to put that out there now and see what you guys think. Who do you think should be the next Labour leader, and what do you think of the situation? Where do you think the mistakes were made in this campaign? What should they do differently? Should they go for a complete different candidate and a different image, or should they stick, you know, roughly in the mould of Corbyn, but just go for someone who might be more connectable to the public? You know, there's an argument for that, but I personally think they need quite a bit of change, and Jess Phillips is the name I'm putting forward as the one who I think should be the next Labour leader. So give me your names in the comments below. Who do you think the next Labour leader should be? I think Lisa Nandy would be a good candidate. As I said, Yvette Cooper would be a good candidate. Emily Thornby. Keir Starmer would be interesting. He's a maybe for me. We'll see. He's got a lot of experience as well. Or a fair amount. But yeah, that's my thoughts the day after the election. And of course, the Lib Dems looking for a new leader. That has happened. Jo Swinson stood down after losing her seat last night, and sadly, you know, it was a close thing, and obviously they didn't do as well as they were hoping, got less than 20 seats, which, considering the little bit of momentum they were building before, that's not really good enough. But, you know, that's happened, and she cut a very passionate speech today about the direction of the country and what she hopes for the future. Actually, it got a bit preachy, to be honest, but she did cut home a lot of sharp and powerful points in it. She did go out on a bit of a high, although she did go on for a bit long, and it got a bit saccharine. But yeah, she really hit home a lot of truths in that speech, to be fair. It was a strong speech. So interesting to see where they go now as a party, because that's another sort of big blow for them. You know, they sort of looked like they were starting to rebuild their reputation, but I guess the whole bollocks to Brexit, you know, the whole let's just cancel the whole thing, ultimately didn't really sit well with enough people, let's say. But there you have it. The Lib Dems are on the look for a new leader. As of today, some usual candidates in the picture: Ed Davey, Lyra Morgan. But let me know on that as well if you have any ideas who should lead the Lib Dems next. But particularly looking at Labour for now, when the time comes that Corbyn steps down. But thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Thanks. Goodbye.